something that was very telling to me is I usually judge teams by their biggest fans. And the Cowboys' biggest fan, I don't think anyone would question, is Skip Bayless. He is the loudest Cowboys fan. He is one of the most articulate Cowboys fans where he can argue no matter how bad the Cowboys fans are. He'll figure out a way to come up with the argument for them being able to make the Super Bowl that year or be really competitive and at least make it to the NFC Championship, even though it hasn't happened in a long time. Skip Bayless, it took until this past year for him to become slightly jaded about the Cowboys. And why is that? Skip Bayless loathes Mike McCarthy. Skip Bayless does not like Mike McCarthy whatsoever, and he's in the media. He works for Fox Sports. He still has to be a professional, but there was a segment of not First Take, of Undisputed with him and Shannon Sharp, and they were talking about Mike McCarthy was talking about how in the offseason, I've been watching film with Dak, and then we've been watching film with his turnovers because he led the league in turnovers, and we're like, how can we fix this? How can we correct it? And he's like, and then he's also talking about how he wants to run the ball more instead of throwing it, and we threw the ball too much last season. And he's like, wait a minute, Ezekiel Elliott made up most of the carries. Are you going to give all of those carries to Tony Pollard, or are we drafting a running back? And then he goes on to say, he's like, Mike McCarthy is one of those guys who wants to wow you. He thinks he always has to be the smartest guy in the room, and he thinks he always has to say something. And then this coming from Skip Bayless, what he says next of all people is Mike McCarthy's someone who just says things that have no meaning. And he's like, I went through some of the stuff that Mike McCarthy says. And he's like, I have no idea anything what he means. I have no idea anything what he's trying to say. He just kind of goes up there and thinks he has to say something and says it. And he's like, he's Jerry Jones' buddy. They go out and they have nachos once a week and they have their little hangout meeting. And he's like, I don't get it. He's like, I didn't like the hiring of Mike McCarthy. And he's like, it goes all the way back to the first press conference where he's like, Mike McCarthy lied to get the job, where he told Jerry Jones he'd been studying film. He watched all the Cowboys games last year. And then he's like, Mike McCarthy admitted in the first press conference that he lied. And he's like, oh, I got a lot of catching up to do. And then you just see Jerry Jones like, what? Like, what do you mean? Yeah. So it's like when Skip Bayless, the #1 Cowboys fan in the world, the most tyrannical Cowboys fan of them all, is coming out here and saying like Mike McCarthy is a huge problem, and Skip Bayless was advocating that Kellen Moore should stay and probably be the head coach instead of Mike McCarthy. It's like Mike McCarthy is on the hot seat this year and he's coaching for his job, and he's like, Mike McCarthy is also coached Aaron Rodgers to a Super Bowl, and the locker room with Charles Woodson, Clay Matthews, AJ Hawk, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, James Jones, Jermichael Finley is like, need we go on? That's the team that Mike McCarthy led to a Super Bowl. And then it's not like he's one of these guys like Mike Tomlin who made it to a Super Bowl, never had a losing season. Like, no, that's not Mike McCarthy at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think your slander is correct. And the fact that Skip Bayless is abandoning ship, granted he was never big on the hire to begin with.
No, he hated it.
That's a telltale sign. If Skip Bayless, who is the face of Cowboys Nation, you get him on board, you get Billy Betts on board, you get some of the other Cowboys fans on board, then you're having people cheering against the Cowboys. You have them shouting for his name, shouting for his job.
Yeah.
It could be ugly. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not going to criticize I got to see what they do in the draft first before I jump on your ship. I think you're thinking with logic. I like the vision. The offensive line is a concern.
Yeah.
Mike McCarthy is an idiot. I think he's worse than Ron Rivera, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm listening to what you're saying, and I can see what you're saying. I need to see the draft. So come to me after our draft preview, or draft recap, I should say.
Okay.
And I will tell you, and I will tell the viewers, me, the Texans Whisperer, Cowboys feeling outer.
Yeah. Well, it could change if they have a good draft, because this is pre-draft. And this is like what we think they're going to do before the draft. So we don't have that information.